At the family dinner, my father stood up and tapped his glass. The room quieted. He read from a folder like it was a toast, then slid a check across the table to my sister. 3 million. People clapped. My mother smiled at me without warmth. Dad said, "She deserves it. She made something of herself." Then he looked at me and added, "And you're still nothing." Laughter. Polite and sharp. I kept my hands in my lap and stared at the roast potatoes. No one defended me. Why did their lawyer call me this morning? What happened next? The dinner wasn't for me. It was at a private room in a steakhouse my parents loved because the servers wore crisp white shirts and called my father, sir, without being asked. My sister arrived late, dressed like she'd stepped out of a catalog, hair perfect, perfume too expensive for the room. She kissed my mother's cheek and handed my dad a bottle of scotch like it was nothing. I came straight from work. I'd changed in my car, smoothing my dress over my knees, checking my face in the rearview mirror. I remember thinking I looked tired. I told myself it didn't matter. It was family. I should show up. My father had always liked an audience. Even when we were kids, he'd save criticism for when relatives were around. If I mispronounced a word or spilled juice, he'd smile and say, "She's book smart, not life smart." And everyone would laugh. It was easier for them to laugh than to question him. As an adult, the pattern just got cleaner. Less shouting. More statements delivered like facts. At my college graduation, he'd told my aunt, "She's got potential, but she's not a closer." I'd heard it while adjusting my cap. I didn't react. I stood for photos. I did what I always did. What made that steakhouse night different was the money. 3 million isn't a gift. It's a message. My sister had always been my parents' project. They funded her fresh starts. A boutique that lasted 6 months. A photography studio she quit after buying the cameras. A condo deposit they called an investment. When anything failed, my father blamed the market. Bad timing, other people. With me, he blamed character. I didn't ask them for much. I built a steady career. Not glamorous. Just solid. I paid my rent on time. I kept savings. I thought being stable would earn respect. Looking back, stability wasn't impressive to them. It was inconvenient. It meant I couldn't be controlled with panic. The folder at dinner was something my father had prepared with his attorney. He liked paperwork. He liked official things. It made decisions feel moral. The check was part of a larger arrangement, he said. A family allocation. My sister's share was being released early, so she could build a legacy. I watched her nod like she'd earned it. When he called me nothing, my face stayed still. That was the survival skill I'd built. Inside, I went cold. I looked at my mother because some childish part of me still expected her to soften it. She didn't. She dabbed her lips with a napkin and said, "You know how your father is." That phrase again, like it was weather. After dinner, my sister hugged me in the hallway. Her nails were pale pink and sharp. She whispered, "Don't ruin tonight." Like I was the danger. Then she walked back in to accept compliments. I drove home in silence. I didn't cry. I kept thinking about that folder. About what else was inside it. About why my father needed a witness for my humiliation. And about how easy it was for them to decide my value out loud, in public, without fearing any consequence at all. It wasn't just that night. It never was. When we were children, my sister got piano lessons. I got told to practice gratitude. When she forgot homework, my parents emailed the teacher about stress. When I missed one assignment, my father called it laziness. He liked neat categories. She was ambitious. I was difficult. In high school, she crashed my car and cried in the driveway. My parents replaced it within a month. When I asked for help with textbooks my freshman year of college, my father said, "Loans build character." I signed them alone. Even holidays followed a pattern. My sister's birthdays were events. Balloons, catered food, professional photos. Mine were quiet dinners at home. If I asked for something specific, my mother would say, "Let's not make a fuss." The message was clear. I wasn't meant to require much. As adults, it shifted into something smoother. My sister started ventures and my parents funded them. I built steady work and paid my own way. When she needed a deposit for her first business lease, my father said, "It's an opportunity." When I mentioned wanting to buy a small apartment, he said, "Maybe wait." You're not ready. I kept waiting for a moment when they'd notice the difference. The way I never asked. The way I never missed payments. The way I showed up to family dinners even when I left smaller than I arrived. That moment never came. The steakhouse scene didn't surprise me. That's what unsettled me most. I'd felt it coming. I'd seen the way my father spoke about legacy lately, about transferring assets while he was still alive. I'd noticed my sister's new confidence, like she already knew something I didn't. I wasn't excluded by accident. I was excluded by design. My role had always been supporting cast. Reliable. Predictable. Replaceable. Driving home that night, I didn't think, this is unfair. I thought, of course they did this publicly. Of course they needed witnesses to confirm the story they'd been telling for years. She was the success. I was the example of what not to be. And the worst part wasn't the money. It was realizing I'd spent decades trying to earn approval from people who had already decided I wasn't worth investing in. The lawyer's call the next morning wasn't random. It was connected to something in that folder. Something I hadn't seen yet. The lawyer called at 9:12 a.m. I almost ignored it. Unknown number. But something in me knew. He introduced himself calmly, mentioned my father's firm, then asked if I was aware of a clause attached to the family allocation agreement. I said no. He paused, like he'd expected that. Apparently, alongside the $3 million transfer, there was an amendment. A restructuring of my parents' estate. Assets shifted. Shares reassigned. And my name, specifically my share, had been reduced. Not removed. Reduced. On paper, it looked strategic. Clean. Legal. What made it different was the condition. The document described me as financially unstable and unlikely to contribute meaningfully to family holdings. That language wasn't accidental. It justified reallocating my portion to my sister. Permanently. I sat at my kitchen table. Phone pressed to my ear. Staring at nothing. The lawyer's voice stayed professional. He said he felt obligated to confirm I'd been informed, given the reputational implications of the wording. Reputational. That was the real injury. They hadn't just handed her money. They'd rewritten the story legally. Made it official. Worthless wasn't just a dinner insult. It was documentation. I thanked him. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and searched for my own attorney's number. I didn't know what I would say yet. I only knew one thing clearly. I wasn't going to let a description of me become permanent record. For the first time, I wasn't trying to be seen as valuable. I was protecting what was mine. My lawyer didn't react emotionally. That helped. He read the clause twice, then asked for copies of prior drafts. He requested timelines, valuations, correspondence. I forwarded everything I had. I didn't contact my parents. I didn't warn my sister. I simply let professionals speak to professionals. 2 weeks later, something shifted. Apparently, the amendment hadn't been executed properly. One signature was missing. A procedural detail my father's team overlooked in their confidence. That meant the reallocation wasn't finalized. It meant their clean revision was still contestable. My father called me that evening. His voice wasn't sharp. It was careful. He said there had been a misunderstanding. He said the wording was standard. He said I shouldn't escalate things. I listened. I didn't argue. For the first time, he sounded uncertain. My sister sent a message the next day asking if we could handle this privately. She said lawyers complicate families. I didn't respond. The irony was quiet. They'd used legal documents to define my worth. Now they wanted privacy. Over the following months, adjustments were made. Language revised. Shares restored. No apology attached. Just paperwork corrected. The dinner story never got retold. No one mentioned the clause publicly. But the tone changed. At a family gathering later that year, my father introduced me differently. He listed my accomplishments. He kept it brief. I noticed, but I didn't react. What changed wasn't the money. It wasn't even the estate. It was the dynamic. They understood something now. I wasn't the quiet daughter anymore. I was the one who reads the fine print. And I don't smile through it.